Today, I want to talk to you about meekness, about living a meek and weak way of life and its disadvantages, as well as about the advantages of the alternative way of life. So you'll learn about both the disadvantages of meekness as well as the alternative option, which is ultimately better for you. Stay tuned to learn more. Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the Growth Philosophy Podcast, a bite-sized weekly podcast focused on empowering you to think better and upgrade your life. So let's talk about living a meek life, why that's bad for you, and the alternative. Far too many people live a passive life, a life of insignificance, meekness, and weakness. Far too many people live their lives being scared of taking charge of their lives. Far too many people. But as you will find out over the course of this talk, that is not a good way to live. It isn't. Survival of the fittest isn't just a law of the jungle. It applies in real life too. Even though you might not get attacked by a predator like you might in the jungle, even in this era of unprecedented safety, being strong matters. Being strong is the better choice for yourself because being weak causes a whole host of problems, many of which stem from a sense of inferiority and worthlessness, or worse. There are a lot of reasons why being meek and weak is bad for you. But here are three big ones. Being meek and weak causes hopelessness. So that's a very big one. Another big one is the fact that it creates a spiral of negativity, which can drive people away since no one likes being around a downer. And you know this. And yet another big one is the fact that it holds you back from creating the life you might want to, and results in a life full of regrets and even despair. Being strong, on the other hand, has lots of advantages. Here are three big ones. Being strong helps you become happier. It gives you the power and the strength to be there for the people you care about. And it enables you to create the life you want and massively improves your capacity to achieve all the things you want and more. There are many advantages to being strong, while there are many disadvantages to being meek. The three I mentioned so far, for both, are some of the most significant ones and makes the point I want to make, which is the fact that being strong always trumps being weak. Always. Strength is important, but it comes in many shapes and forms, so don't just assume that you need to be very loud or boisterous or even physically big to be strong. Size or the loudness of your voice has nothing to do with strength. Since the strength I'm referring to in this case is about your inner or your mental strength, your physical size or strength is secondary, if relevant at all. Being physically strong is certainly a good thing, as it has a positive impact on your health, and you certainly should work on that. But even if you're not physically big or strong, you can still be a mental Hulk. Strength also is not a matter of how loud you are. Inner strength isn't about showing off, after all. In fact, some of the strongest people in history were not loud extroverts, but rather quiet introverts, like Gandhi and Mother Teresa and Nelson Mandela. Mental strength isn't reliant on your physical size or any other external factor, for that matter, in the same way it is not about how loud you are. Your inner strength, which is the strength that really matters at the end of the day, is all in your mind, and as such, everyone can develop it. Everyone has the ability to be mentally strong. No matter who you are, you can become mentally strong and take charge of your life. There are contrary thoughts to this though. Maybe the thought goes something along the lines of, oh, I don't really care what happens to me. Maybe that's the logic someone uses to justify the meek way of life. Now, if that's the logic, then there's nothing more to say then, right? Well, not entirely. That logic isn't actually accurate or correct, because even if you don't care about yourself, you very likely have people in your life that you care about. And being meek won't enable you to be there for them or help them much, if at all. On the rare occasion that there is absolutely no one in the person's life worth protecting, then there is still people in the world that need help. There are millions of people around the world who need help, and the starting point of really helping them is to take charge of your own life. Yes, the meek can help too, but the ability to help and protect goes up significantly when the person is strong, as opposed to if the person is meek and weak. Just imagine if Gandhi was weak. Who knows what the state of that revolution would have been? Or how about Nelson Mandela? What if he was meek and weak? Would apartheid have been abolished if he was not strong? I seriously doubt it. Even if it did happen, it might not have happened for a very long time. It was the strength of those people that made things happen. If they were meek, history would have been a very different position right now. The meek way of life is often the result of a defeatist or even a victim mentality. The core rationale or logic of that way of thinking boils down to not taking personal responsibility. Personal responsibility. Yes, it is easier to blame others or even the world, far easier than it is to take responsibility. Far easier. But the unfortunate truth is that even though shifting responsibility to external factors is the easier path, it is also a surefire way to continue being stuck and living a life you don't want to live. Surefire way. On that note, I'm going to point out something that you already know, even if you might not have acknowledged it. And it's the fact that the world does not belong to the meek and the weak. That's just the truth of it. The people who change the world and improve it are the ones who take charge of their lives and go make things happen. The meek and the weak, on the other hand, live passive lives of little to no meaning. Being weak and not taking charge of life or not facing up to things might feel like the easy thing to do, but it rarely ever is the best course of action, and generally makes life more difficult over time. This is yet another big reason why being strong and taking charge of your life is ultimately better for you than being passive about life and living a meek and weak existence. However, this is not to say that you need to start taking massive risks, especially risks that can put your life in jeopardy. I said strong, not stupid. You don't need to put yourself at risk to be strong. If that's absolutely necessary, then that's something you will need to carefully evaluate and then decide. But rarely are we faced with scenarios where we absolutely need to put ourselves at severe risk of harm. Rarely, if ever. Pretty much always there will be alternatives, and you can be strong while being smart. That said, there is something else to consider where risks are concerned. And it's the fact that we will all die one day. It's just a fact of life. No matter who you are or how much you try, death just cannot be avoided. It's one of the most absolute universal truths. Even stars and planets and galaxies die. Even the sun, which is possibly the most powerful creation that we are most familiar with, even that will one day come to an end. That vast source of strength and power will die one day. So, we are nothing in comparison. Nothing is forever. So it's not just a matter of survival, but rather a matter of how well you live. This is also how you can differentiate between the strong and the weak, since the weak usually are the ones who live their lives with lots of regrets. They live lives that have little to no meaning and make little to no positive contribution to the world. Being strong is good for you, and essential even. But that's not to say that you need to be strong absolutely 100% of the time. That's not possible. No human is infallible, so being weak once in a while is okay. It is. Experiencing weakness once in a while is a normal part of life, one that no one can avoid. So being weak when tragedy strikes or something bad happens is normal and okay. But what is not okay is making weakness and meekness the default state of mind. There are two more things I want to point out about strength, since these are often things that cause misunderstandings. The first one is the fact that being strong does not mean that you cannot ask for help. This is a very common misconception, that you can't ask for help if you're strong. Being strong isn't about being infallible. No matter how much you try, that's not really a plausible option. Trust me on this, I've tried. I grew up with that mental model, the belief that asking for help is a sign of weakness, and found out the hard way that not asking for help just makes life harder. There is actually nothing weak about asking for help. Everyone needs help, and asking for help is actually a sign of strength. The other thing I want you to remember is that having feelings and experiencing your emotions is not a sign of weakness. This is yet another big misconception about strength, so it is important to know that having emotions doesn't make you weak, it just makes you human. There is a lot more to be said about those two things, so I'll do separate talks about them in the coming days. For now, it's good for you to remember those two things. The fact that strength has nothing to do with asking for help or experiencing emotions, so that they don't get in your way. It's important to understand those two facts and remember them in order for you to stay clear, rather than making your life unnecessarily difficult. Being strong is challenging enough as it is, without stacking up such incorrect and unnecessary misconceptions. As for addressing meekness and living a weak life, here is the bottom line. If you don't want to live a life of zero meaning, you have to embrace your strength and overpower your meekness. Being meek isn't a good thing, and it certainly won't lead to a good life. Experiencing weakness once in a while is fine, but never let that become your status quo. Never let that become your default, because being weak and meek does not lead to a fulfilling life. Being strong, on the other hand, is not just good for you, but for others too. There are many, many benefits to being strong, whereas leading a meek life is full of disadvantages. The world will become your oyster when you grab life by the horns and face life head on, rather than cowering behind someone or something worrying about everything. Create a life where you don't just survive, but thrive. Don't be meek. Take charge of your life.